Today is Monday, July the 6th, and you can see the McClellan oscillator turned just positive, just a little bit over zero. Here's what it looks like on a more compressed scale going back to July 2015. So that's 5 years ago. And here's your zero line right here. So that's bullish. The Dow Jones is ticked up. But really what the Dow Jones has been doing is just flat. So we had this big drop here in the McClellan oscillator. And we had a bounce back and a big drop down. But the Dow Jones moving average pretty much was just range bound, within, this very small area here. So now we've had this huge move up in the McClellan oscillator, but very little in the Dow Jones index. If we look at the chart itself, we see that today we stopped dead at this gap. A gap that was created on July the 11th, and we've been fighting that gap ever since, and then coming down to test a lower gap. So we've just been range bound between two gaps, and the volume attests to that. When you look at the stacked volume, you see just a little bit more volume than last week, but still pretty anemic compared to all of the prior weeks. The volume for stocks that were advancing really outpaced those that declined, and the summation index has started to make a little turn upwards because the McClellan oscillator has gotten to a positive number, whereas it's been negative all the way since June the 18th. It's now positive again, so we can see the summation index making a little bit of a reversal going northwards. But now let's look at the market. We looked at the Dow Jones. The S&P tells a real interesting story because we almost closed this gap. For all intents and purposes, you could say that if you count that tail in here, we have closed the gap, and we finished the day exactly at the top of the gap, but just short of this trend line, which should provide resistance for us going forward. So we've got the top of the gap, and we've got this trend line, which means tomorrow should be continuation of a channeling day, or down as we continue to do this W pattern. The volatility index only moved up a slight bit, but it did finish up at the top of its daily range. Apple had an unbelievable day, 3% up $11. And you can see in the top left here that I sold 300 shares, not at $373.93 because I had short calls. So my net on that was something like about $320 with the value that I sold of the calls and the $300 that I got for the stock. I got $297.25. But since that was stock that was bought on margin, it wasn't worth keeping any more for the other $250 per contract because I was paying $400 a month in margin. So I took the money from those sales and I shorted 3 August the 7th, that's 32 days from now, 3 August the 7th, 345 puts. And I did that so that the net effect is if the stock were put to me, I would be buying it back at 341, right down here, which would be a pretty decent drop and a nice opportunity, I would think, to buy Apple again and then short the 350 or 360 calls once they're assigned to me, if they are. If not, then I make the equivalent of 1% of my portfolio just in that 1% of that particular account where I traded them. And I think 1% a month on that account and 12% a year is a reasonable expectation for growth given the, I still think, uncertainty in the marketplace. Amazon, huge day. I mean, look at this. This is parabolic. Caterpillar hit 130 and has now moved over but came down to end on the 78.6. Facebook had a 3% day as well, but you can see it's still below the 127.2%. The stock that we looked at last week that really outperformed today was FCX. Now we have closed this gap, so we can get rid of this gap and now start paying attention to the Fibonacci's. We've passed 78.6 today and finished above this minor Fibonacci, 88.7. The stock really is moving to 1364, and now that I've freed up some cash from 300 Apple shares, I'm going to take a good look at Freeport-McMoRan tomorrow and I'm going to put a stop of 1264 on whatever I buy. Home Depot finished at around number $250, which is fine. I've still got 245 and 250 shorts that expire next Friday, not this Friday. Nvidia up $9. It's popping up to the 161.8%. What else do we want to look at? The banks. Let's take a look at the banks. Did they respond favorably today? Bank of America up 1.7. Goldman Sachs up 5%. JP Morgan 2.6%. Wells Fargo 0.63. That's really an underperforming stock, and since they're reducing their dividend, it's dead money. US Bank Corp had a bounce, two bounces off 61.8%, and had an update. It was up 2.5%, pretty much in line with JP Morgan, better than Bank of America, better than Citigroup, but didn't perform as well as Goldman Sachs. So that's it for today. I still believe my theory is channeling. Now that we finish this gap and we have this trend line here, I'm looking for resistance.